Could you briefly share your journey into education leadership?
In North America, where students are combining work and they have work integrated into their school programs.
So, when we talk about global education, what does that mean from an institutional perspective?
Initially, I want to establish a definition. I'm glad that that's what you're looking for.
How do Canadian institutions design programs to support international students?
There are kind of two ways that they're setting up.
What strength do you observe in Indian students?
I notice, like, if we're talking about strengths of Indian students, there's three that I that just really jump out at me. I really want to approach this delicately because I don't want to be the Canadian guy saying this is what Indian students they're prioritizing the community over their own individual needs.
But when I'm talking to you, I'm realizing that, it could be a great cultural difference when our children go abroad.
One student from India and we had one student from Pakistan, they might find each other, even though there's a conflict between the countries that you hear about.
Behind the geopolitical thing. What does career ready truly mean today?
They're more to the soft side, soft skills. And I was looking through your videos and I saw you had one. I was happy to see you had a video on soft skills. So this dovetails from that quite nicely. I think that's a big one. Emotional resilience. And so when we talk about that, the ability to have an experience like a culture shock experience, but not give up and move through it and keep your wits about you, and critical thinking. I loved it. Yeah, standing on the street and there was a mosque on one side, and there was a Sikh temple and a Hindu temple and a Christian church, and all four were looking at each other.
What advice would you give to a 20-year-old student who's preparing for an international career?
Not everybody needs to study abroad, and also India. Our prime minister was just in India last week, making a deal. There's a bright future in India. I think you should question your intention. The professor was like 2 steps below God. They knew everything there was.
There in Canada also?
Absolutely. Back then it was, yeah.
Is there any change in the curriculum with AI coming?
It's just the next step in our evolution.
Hello everyone. Welcome to Podcast Vibe with Neha. This episode marks the beginning of a special series, Education Beyond Borders. In a world where conversations between nations may sometimes feel complex, classrooms quietly continue building bridges. Today, we explore global education from an institutional lens, how systems are designed, how international students are supported, and how career readiness is shaped. I'm honored to welcome Ian Morrison, Program Head in a university in Canada, who brings deep experience in higher education leadership and student success. Hi, Ian. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Neha. I'm very happy to be here.
Great. So, Ian, before we begin, could you briefly share your journey into education leadership and what your role involves today?
Yes. So I'm from Canada, and I'm from a particular part of Canada, obviously. So a lot of people, I think, when that aren't Canadians, when they think of Canada, and I've heard this question even traveling in the US. Are you from Vancouver, Toronto, or Montreal? I'm from neither of those three. So I come from the central part of Canada it's called the Prairies. And the province is called Saskatchewan. So instead of states, we have provinces here. I grew up. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, and I think it's relevant to my journey. So I grew up in a very, very small community, and it was a farming community. And so I did a little research recently, and it said that the average farm in Punjab in India, which I've traveled to several times, is about a dozen acres. So the average farm in Saskatchewan, where I live, is 1,500 acres, 1,500. So it would be more than 100 times. And so, as you can imagine, the communities where people grow up in are small, and there's great distances between them. So the place I grew up in had about 200 people, if you can imagine that, and we weren't all related. So, so a very, very small. And but I had a sense of adventure when I was a young man. So, anyways, I really like the idea of culture and travel and all of that kind of stuff. And so when I left, I for me and people who grew up where I did, uh, education meant leaving home. So I had to leave home at a very young age. So I would have been, you know, well, it was a long journey, but 17, 18 years old the first time I left. And so eventually I went to university and so eventually I came back to Saskatchewan and I got a job working with at the local university in the city I live in. And I was working in cooperative education. And so that is a system of education. It's quite popular in North America, where students are combining work and they have work integrated into their school programs. And I did that for a little bit. And at that time, I was working with a lot of international students that were traveling to Canada to study. And I kind of fell in love with them. And so I wrote my master's thesis on international students in Canada and what their experience was. And I worked with a number of students, and we did these like intricate case studies. And I wrote my thesis on that. And so that was how I met the conditions of my master's degree. And then I went to work in from there to a small high school, and again I was helping to set up an international program. There was a private high school, um, and we were attempting to attract international students, and we were moving into East Asia and Latin America and these kind of places. And then when I left that, I was into working in international education. I went, and then I was got into international recruitment and doing that work, and that brought me to India several times and to about a half a dozen countries in Asia and also into through the Caribbean and Latin America and those kind of places. So that's where I am today. And then I moved from international education into to back to cooperative education. I manage a co-op department now at our school. So yeah, it's been a long road. People used to ask me, because they would see I was traveling abroad a lot for work, and they'd say, "How do you get into that?" And I'd say, "Well, I grew up in a small town, and and it always begins with that, and so that you can't replicate my journey. It's just been such a strange one, and so anyways, that's what brought me
So,
to today.
Ian, when you talk about international students, you have worked a lot with international students. You told that your master's was also related to that, right?
That's right.
So, when we talk about global education, what does that mean from an institutional perspective?
Yeah. So a, a concept like global education, when I hear something like that, I want to establish a definition. I'm glad that that's what you're looking for here, because I think that's vitally important. And I think it's probably one of the biggest problems in the world today is that we aren't agreeing on definitions. And so so when I say global education, I would be talking about from an institutional perspective, how institutions are engaging internationally. And so that it manifests itself in a number of different ways. So you might see here in Canada, there's a lot of attraction of international students, especially from India, quite a lot, but not India alone, other countries throughout the world. But yes, yeah, and but it's also involves how you're engaging in your educational models too. And so you can see things like exchanges. You can see now, and you just said when you framed the question from an institutional perspective, uh, global education from a individual perspective is, I think, actually the most exciting frontier right now, because we're at a place where, and this lends itself to institutional perspective, but we're at a place where people can engage globally with their phone, and that has never happened before in like the history of our species. So um, yeah, so that's what I would say, just in brief, that it's just how institutions are engaging at a global level.
So should we talk about individuals or should we talk about institutions?
We could talk about institutions, but I just think that when you're discussing it, it's hard to separate the two because the institutions are they operate through individuals. I'll tell you a fun story. When I was a child, there was an old man in my community. We actually called them villages. So in my village, and he had a ham radio. I don't know if that's a thing you're familiar with, but a ham radio was a type of radio that you could manipulate through radio frequencies, and you could speak to other people in different places. And I remember being at his house with my mother and hearing him, and he was talking to somebody in another country. I think it was in the UK. And in those days, this might have been almost 40 years ago now. But in those days, to make a phone call across the ocean, you'd be paying at that time, I think it was probably $2 or $3 a minute. And this man for free could do that. And I thought that's shocking. But now with your phone, and then, if you wanted to go deep into some topic, you had to go to a university and almost take a degree. There's just to research, it just wasn't. But all of that is gone now. And now with our phones, we can do that. I can have this conversation with you across the world,
Absolutely.
and it's amazing to me. And I think it's I'm getting close to 50 now. It's people of my age. I think often we step back and go, that's really incredible. And I don't think the youth understand that. But it opens up on an educational level, the idea, like when you're talking about like what you can do online and online learning environments and ecosystems. I think it's shocking to me.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
So, how do Canadian institutions design programs to support international students?
There are kind of two ways that they're setting up. Now, the institutions are supporting the students through they've created, like, generally through human resources. Yeah, so there's a number of different structures that schools will put in place, institutions will put in place to support the students themselves through human resources and through various programming and things like that. But when they're designing the programs too, they're asking themselves a couple of questions. So, and this I think is very important. If one was a young Indian student contemplating studying abroad, when you're looking at program specific selection, I think this is an important thing to keep in mind. So, programs or schools, institutions will look at, can we uh, is there a demand for this programming? So is there a demand for this subject matter? It's a crude way of saying it, but can we sell it? So will students come if we create the program? Um, and then so that is one way that they will design programs, is that they will fill, and so they're
Mhm.
keeping that in mind. The other way that they're looking at is the school will say, okay, well, we have a capacity to train people in some particular subject matter, and we have perhaps there's a demand in the local labor market for people with those skills. We don't have enough folks domestically to fill that demand, so we'll use international students to bridge that gap. So
Okay.
yeah, I would say to an aspiring international student, think about what it is you're looking for in that through your education. If you're looking for a program that you're going to return home with, so you want to get a foreign education and come back, being equipped with that, then you want to probably take the former type of program, a program that's marketable in your own area, your own geography. But if you're looking to settle and you're looking to then you're going to want to pick the latter. So you want to pick a program where it's high demand in the local market. And so when you're looking at this concept of job scope, um, you don't assume that what is true in your home country is going to be true in your host country. So it's
Exact.
it's a very important concept to keep in mind.
Great. So, could you explain how experiential learning or co-op models you are working with it, right?
Yeah,
Currently, your
I
profile
am.
is.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
So, how this helps a student transition into the workforce?
Yeah. So again, this is a lofty definition. And so you may find you want to cut some of some of what I tell you. And this is the basis of my a good chunk of my adulthood has been spent in this. So I might ramble on too much here. But so when you're talking about experiential learning, okay, this goes back to an educational philosopher. I like to always go back to an educational philosopher from the 1960s, 70s, and 80s in the US. His name was Malcolm Knowles. And he came up with this concept called andragogy. So you've heard the term pedagogy before, right? So
Yeah.
pedagogical models. So how do we build education? But his argument was that the original pedagogical models were built on a model where the teacher is all knowing and all powerful. And the student is, he actually described it as like a painter. And the student is a blank canvas on which the teacher would
Teacher
paint
can. Yeah.
their masterpiece. They would fill the student with knowledge. Uh,
Okay.
and so what Noel said was that when we're dealing with adults, we need a different model. That pedagogical model is not optimal for teaching adults. And different definitions as to what an adult is here in Canada. It's anyone over the age of 18, but I don't know that that's the best definition. but um, so, anyways, he decided that there were assumptions that could be made about adults and that it would be better to create a learning environment where the adult learner was controlling the learning to a large extent. And so the assumptions are that the adults are motivated to learn. They're coming with a set of experiences that they could bring to the learning environment. And and then that we could work with that when in doing so. So now we're starting to get away once he came forward from the idea of teacher at the front of the room, students in neatly designed rows, and the teacher has all the information, the students have none. Instead, let's work with what the students already know, and let them be more have more control in the learning endeavor. So, and this is kind of where the idea of experiential learning comes in. Now, experiential learning has existed for as long as learning has occurred, but provides us a bit of a framework. So, when we're talking about experiential learning, we're talking about learning through doing. Okay, so it could be something along the lines of, in the old days, like our ancient ancestors, the apprentice and the master. That where the apprentice is working with the master craftsman to become a master themselves. So that is a original sense of experiential learning. But where you see it in universities in terms of case studies, laboratory work, where you're actually engaging in something kinesthetic. You're actually doing something. Maybe it could be group presentations where it's beyond simply listening to they used to say the sage on the stage, the wise teacher that's telling you you're vigorously taking notes and getting that information, which in later you'll be tested upon. Now it's more, you're going the teacher is the guide and guiding you through a learning experience. So it's experiential. Um, then from experiential learning, we have a specific type called work integrated learning. And so one of the ways this is done is where we are integrating a work experience into the learning. So students are going to a job site, a third party site, and they're having, they could be observing work going on, but they could be actively doing the work as well. And so we hear terms now like internships or practicums. These are popular in the West, and they could be in India as well. I'm just not as familiar with it, but I'm sure they're happening on some level. And so this is where the student is coming in, but it's still a part of their program. So we're not talking about a post graduation job. We're talking about it's embedded in the program. They'd be getting credit for it. It would be part of the educational, uh, pedagogical or andragogical experience. cooperative education came out of the University of Cincinnati in the United States, in Ohio, in the 19, I think it was the 1960s. I could be wrong on that. Someone on Wikipedia could correct me. But anyways, it's the idea of a cooperative education program. So this is a long way to get to the answer to your question, but it'll be. I promise you, I am. So the cooperative education programs have certain criteria. So the one thing is that it's paid. So that's the first and most important thing. The students are getting paid. So you earn while you learn. That's the idea. And they're always a part of the program. The student is getting credit for it, but it's cooperative. So the host company that would be welcoming the student. Um, is an extension of the university, or is an extension of the learning environment. And then this another criteria is the student is always returning to school after the work experience. So some co-op programs will have just one co-op experience, but usually it's more than one. It would be several where they're going out and then they come back, they go out and then they come back to school. So this does have a pedagogical benefit in that the students are seeing a practical application of the theory they're learning, and they're experiencing it. So when they come back, it's a richer learning experience. It also it improves the students into, because you're making money. So I mean, it lowers your stress and considerable money in many cases. So the student, by virtue of the fact that the students are getting paid, so it lessens the stress of education and that kind of thing. And then the pedagogical improvement from seeing the practical application of your work. And then, but the other side of it is that the specifically to the transitioning to the workplace, because the students are while they're working, they're gaining skills, that so they have job experience in their field.
What age it is when these children go out and do on-job training, or this your co-op
Could
program?
be any age. Could be any age. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
could be
So we have
any age.
now, yeah. So this is a little bit of a cultural difference between maybe Canada and other parts of the world. Students here are studying from there people older than me are studying, so into their 60s even. They will always come back. If people think they have another 10, 15 years of work left, they might retrain and they might take an entirely different pathway. And companies, employers are accepting of that here. So the typical age you would see for a Canadian student would probably be, an average age would be late 20s. So most students are looking at education in Canada as a long-term thing. So when I mentioned that I completed my master's degree, I was 36 years old on graduation day. When I began my bachelor's degree, I was 18 years old. So it's this concept of lifelong learning that people are doing,
Even
as
after 60
constantly
years?
going back. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I remember when I did my undergraduate degree in Toronto, there was a gentleman, I can't imagine he's even with us anymore. He was in his 60s that was in my class. So yeah, yeah, so most certainly. Um, but yeah, back to where it the benefits, that is what is that's how it helps them transition, is through gaining that experience, making the money, improving their economic situation, but also improving their pedagogical benefits. Yeah.
Great. So, talking about the Indian students in global systems, what strength do you observe in Indian students?
I notice, like, if we're talking about strengths of Indian students, there's three that I that just really jump out at me. Um, so I would see emotional, like an emotional resilience. So this ability to a perseverance, that's one. Ingenuity. And I think that's embedded in the Indian culture. I've noticed a lot of creative ways of solving problems coming from India, and coming, like when I was in India, I see it from the most simple person to the most educated person. There's always a sense of ingenuity. I think it's embedded in the culture. And then this a sense of adventure, like we're seeing, and maybe that's in the students, but anybody who's gonna cross an ocean to come and study, you have to You have to have that in you. So those would be kind of the three main things I would think.
And where do you think they can grow further to succeed globally?
Well, so this is something that you may want to tell your audience how I know you or how I've come to know you, and that's through we have a mutual friend who's here in Canada, and this is a topic that we have discussed at some length. I really want to approach this delicately because I don't want to be the Canadian guy saying this is what Indian students can, but there is, I think it's cultural awareness. And I think that's anybody who is having a international experience, an expatriate experience, is developing cultural awareness where you are. And so there's an interesting topic that we talk about a lot here, and it's this concept of individualism versus collectivism. And so if you look at societies on a continuum of, where collectivism, where the community is at the foremost, to individualism, where does your culture fit? Like, that's a question everyone can ask themselves. So if you think like maybe the most extreme individualistic societies, the US society, and you can, if you look in the stories, right, what is the American hero? It's the rugged individual who went out and solved the problem through his own strength and courage, and then he becomes, the champion, or the Steve Jobs. It's always that one person at the top of the pyramid. Maybe in other cultures you might be looking at the story might be us as a group overcoming a barrier. So uh I would say Canada is somewhere in the middle of those two, where there, and especially, Canada is not a monolith, so there's a lot of different parts of Canada. So there would be a strong sense of community, but it's far more common in Canada where you see someone like myself. I left home when I was a young man. I haven't been back since. I got married at a young age. My parents really didn't have a large part in, like, I would go to them for advice, but I was living my own life. I wasn't thinking about how will they react to this. It just wasn't a thought on my mind. And it's not a better situation or worse. It's just how it is. And in fact, this individualism causes us problems because we struggle because we're on our own too much, I think, in many ways, and we don't rely on our community, and that has mental health challenges. With the Indian students that I see coming, very strong sense of community, and it develops here very quickly because it very quickly they'll find friends. And but I can give you a quick anecdote as to where I think this can cause challenges. So um, if you have let's say um, five young men decide to study in Canada, and they come from, let's say, a community in Gujarat, and they've grown up together since primary school, and they're five best friends, just really really close friends, and they come together and they're starting to look, okay, well, where will we study? So first of all, the question is, where will we study? So they're going to make the decision, and what school will we go to, and what and then the next part, and I think that's okay at this point, but the next question is where it comes into trouble. What program will we take? What program will we study? Now, for three of those five young men, the program that they land on is probably a great idea. But for the other two, it may not be suited to them, but they're prioritizing the community over their own individual needs. So I think it's a balance that people need to arrive at. And it's just understanding, like, the cultural differences that, if I go there and I end up in a program I'm not suited to, but I've got three friends for whom it is, it's not going to help me. so so I think on an individual level, this is a challenge that students
So, how do
face.
you convince them?
How do you convince them? I don't know the answer to that. I don't know. I don't know. I think it comes from sage advice. Like, really, if especially if they're dealing with education agents and these sort of interlocutors, if you can have them be well understanding that. So, you know, you come to Canada, come with your friends, it's fine. But make decisions that also work for yourself as well as for your community. And I honestly, I don't know the answer to that. But the thing is, there's this concept of worldview, right? We all have our own worldviews, and so sometimes it's just a thing where you almost have to learn from your own successes and failures, and you maybe can't be convinced. You have to have the experience yourself. But if I could give a piece of advice, and people would listen to me, that would be it. Is that consider your own self interest as well as that of that of your collective.
They feel that we should be with our friends, like whatever the course they are doing, we should do it together. But maybe
I see that a
academically and
lot.
culturally, they are different. Culturally,
Yeah.
though maybe
Yeah.
not because all are Indians, but academically, the performance and the intelligence that could differ.
That's right. That's right. And see, if you're coming to study abroad, you're the one who's going to ultimately be writing the exams. You're the one who's going to be applying for the jobs. So your friends will only take you so far. But Neha, I can tell you, I've seen this play out almost in extremes in some cases, where I've had two or three young men, often young men, sometimes young ladies too, come into, or sometimes it's a young man with a young lady. They'll come into my office, and one will be doing the talking, and they'll be asking me questions, and we'll be 5 to 10 minutes into the conversation, and I'll realize the one who's doing the talking is not the one we're talking about. So
I get that.
that's the most extreme. In fact, in my career, there's maybe been half a dozen examples of that. But this is not the pathway to to success. You've got to stand on your own. But
Actually, these things are
all
very
of this,
common in India. When we face all this, we don't consider it like it is not. We don't find it absurd, yeah. Because
yeah,
that's how our culture is. Like parents will do the talking for children, and that's how
yeah.
that's how it is.
By law,
But when
that's
I'm
funny you
talking to
mention
you,
that.
I'm realizing that yeah, it could be a great cultural difference when when our children go abroad.
Yeah, yeah. Even in by Canadian law, if if a mother phones me or a father phones me to ask about their son or daughter, I have my only legal answer I can give is, I'm sorry, this is an adult that we're talking about. I cannot speak on their behalf. And in fact, I cannot even confirm the individual you're speaking about attends our school. So
Oh,
that's a big difference. And so
huge!
it's
That's a huge
yeah,
difference.
yeah, yeah. So I've had not, and it's not an Indian specific thing, and I've had Canadian parents on the phone yelling at me, to say, telling me, I'm paying tens of thousands of dollars for my son or daughter to be there, and you can't tell me what grades they're getting, and I'm sorry, I cannot.
So, is it difficult for the students who go there from India to adjust this kind of, because they have been always like dependency is more on our family or as
Yes,
you
right,
said
right.
community. So
Yeah.
they
Well,
must be having real struggle to adjust there, I feel.
the thing is, um, anybody who has you're going to have this concept of culture shock. I don't know if you're familiar with
Yeah.
the idea of culture shock.
Yeah.
But culture shock is it's an inverted U, so it works like this. So in the beginning, when you arrive, everything, and now in Canada we have winter and we have cold winter, and today was a warm day for March. It warmed up to a balmy +7 degrees Celsius. So I went outside without a jacket on because the winter is coming to an end. But when students arrive in September, the sun is shining, the grass is green, the birds are chirping. It's maybe 25 degrees Celsius, very comfortable. Uh, and they arrive in Canada, and everything is it's romantic in a way. You're in a new country, and
Absolutely.
you're
Freedom and
meeting
everything.
new friends. Yeah, yeah, and all these new young people around you. But so this is why it's an inverted U. So in the beginning, the culture shock is very low. But then as things go, the
Gradually.
weather gets colder. Yeah, and you get busier and your exams are coming. It's a new way of learning because studying in Canada is different than in certainly in India. The way the studying is done is different. You're meeting new people. You're not maybe the things you thought were charming in the beginning. It's almost like a romance in a way. They're less charming, and so, so you start to get, and then the full brunt of the winter comes, and you feel what minus 40 degrees Celsius actually feels like. I mean, you can think about that in your mind, but until you've actually experienced it, you have no idea. And and then you get busy and school doesn't stop because the snow is falling and the brutal cold has come. Um, but then the snow melts and then the birds come out and the flowers come out and you've gone through a whole year of study and you actually didn't fail. You passed. And all of the struggles, now you're a new person altogether. And actually, they've done studies on this. And once you've been a year abroad, you're actually you you almost have no home anymore because what'll happen is um, you now have a new normal. And so, if you were to come here for a year and go back to India, you would actually have a culture shock experience back home because the romantic ideas that you left in your mind about what home was like, uh, you forgot why you left, and because that's what happens in your mind. You're like, no, no, I really want to be back home because of my mother's cooking, and now it's Diwali, and whatever it is, right? All of these things that you're missing, and you're missing. You go back, and you're like, oh, well, yes, they're all great, but these are the reasons why I left, and
Yep.
so now they say expatriates who leave have more difficulty actually adjusting if they were to move back to their country of origin than to just stay where they are once they've got through the initial culture shock. So it's kind of an interesting phenomena. But anybody who has, and this is not the Indians coming to Canada, it's not that, it's anybody who has an expatriate experience will have a similar experience. Um, but there's actually, now you've said that there's things that I see that and it goes back to the strengths that I mentioned earlier about Indian students that is I think helping them a lot. So this sense of community, I gave you the downside to it, but it does have an upside as well. So young students will, they'll form these emotional bonds. They'll meet people like usually of their same language group, and anybody studying, or pardon me, in international. If you look at the academic research on international education, they talk about something called the clustering effect. So that's where people will cluster in groups of their own language, and so also it's kind of cute because let's say we have if we have they'll cluster geographically. So let's say we have students from many different countries, but we have one student from Korea and one student from Japan and one student from China. They'll find each other too. uh, so if if we had one student from India and we had one student from Pakistan, they might find each other, even though there's a conflict between the
Yeah.
countries that you hear
Leaving
about in
this
the news. But
behind the geopolitical thing.
that's right, they leave that
Aspect of
behind.
it.
They do, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so it's funny, but people look for what's familiar, and that's a natural thing for folks to do. But I think to have success, you have to move past that, and you have to branch out and expand your horizons. And the most successful people are the ones who can best do that. Um, and it's the old those old American movies like James Bond movies. I don't know if those are pop or British movies. I guess they are. They're not American. The James Bond movies, and James Bond is, if especially the ones from the '60s, they're not very politically correct, so I probably shouldn't recommend anybody see them. But if you imagine, like, if James Bond goes to India, immediately he will be eating the food and he'll be speaking the language and a song will play and he'll sing along, like it's this concept of cosmopolitanism that he can blend wherever he is, and um we all aspire to that, but those who can do it the best are, they have the most advantage.
Great. So, Ian, talking about the career readiness in 2026, what does career ready truly mean today?
Well, this I think is something that I'm not even sure I know how to answer right now because with AI, what is it going to do to people? Hard skills, where are we going with what are going to be important ones? Are the robots and the AI going to replace us all, or maybe
Yeah.
will will any of us have careers? That's a big question I think that's being asked around the world.
So, what are the
So I
competencies which we have to build, like, to be future ready?
yes, so I would say they're more to the soft side, soft skills. And I was looking through your videos and I saw you had one. I was happy to see you had a video on soft
Yeah.
skills. So this dovetails from that quite nicely. I think
Thank
it's
you.
I think it's communication, particularly cross-cultural communication. I think that's a big one. I think emotional resilience. And so when we talk about that, the ability to, have an experience like a culture shock experience, but not give up and move through it and keep your wits about you. Um, and critical thinking. So when I talk about critical thinking, what I mean is um, two. There's two sides to it, and so you hear a lot especially in the West, about critical theory.
Yeah.
But critical thinking it doesn't need to be so complex. Uh, I just see two sides to it. The first is to be able to challenge your own assumptions, so your own worldview. So can you say, okay, this is what I've come to believe throughout my whole life. Is it true? And also, but to be able to have an honest conversation with yourself and say, is this true? And if not, I need to discard it and I need to adopt a new truth. And that is a very difficult thing for people to do. So that's one side of it. That's
Learn,
called
unlearn, and relearn, right?
100%. That's a great way of saying it. Um, but the other side to it of critical thinking, I would say, is also when you learn something, can you apply it? So, in the old days when we were like, I mean, still this happens to an extent. Your exam, like if you think of primary school, maybe your rote memorization, right? So you're giving the kids a series of facts, and then you're examining them on their ability to repeat those facts back to you. Uh, Really, we didn't need to do that once we invented the pencil and the paper. because because like, once you can write something down, you don't need to it's not so
Learn
important
it.
that you
Like,
remember what's more important is, can you do something with that information, right?
hmm.
Like, can you can identify a horse, that's one thing, but can you ride the horse? That's to me is the greater thing. And so can we generally, and then once you can ride a horse, can you also, from your what you've learned from that, ride a bicycle? So are you able to take a base knowledge and apply it to other situations?
You got that.
um
Mm.
so I think those two sides of it, that um I already know this, and maybe I'm in a new environment and a new situation, and how can I do it? So and this is I think this
So,
is the future.
applying your learning, right? That is what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Not
But
with
then
one.
also this emotional resilience, I think, is so important, and I think those two things: career ready, world ready. Are you ready for planet Earth in 2026? I think those two things are what are going to separate. And then I guess a third one I would add is the communication, that you can communicate with people across cultures, and it goes with critical thinking too. When I tell you I grew up in a town with 200 people, you're creating a vision in your mind of what that looks like. But is it right? Is it accurate? Well, I can tell you, for as a matter of fact, the first time I went to India, the thought occurred to me that either this is real, or where I've come from is real,
So,
but
what
the
was the
two
difference you
places
were
do not.
finding?
Yeah, they don't exist on the same planet. It's not possible. It's just too different.
What is
But
it that?
so I always would think, when we're talking about young international students, you need to realize that when you go abroad to study, now maybe, if especially a place that's culturally very different, um your assumptions are not necessarily going to travel well, and so you have to be open to re-examining them and
Yes.
using these critical thinking skills. And I think it's incumbent upon educators to be equipping.
How did you like India?
How did I like India? I loved it. Yeah. It the first time I went, now I've been there more than once. The first time I went, because it was so different, it took me a while to process it. And it wasn't I had a great time. I was treated very well, but I remember thinking like I needed to read about it. I like because I saw so much, and I spent a lot of time reading, like kind of to try and understand what I had seen and what I had experienced, and reading about the history of India, and the the culture and the various different cultures. A very diverse place. This is another thing too. There is and this I don't know how you feel about this or how Indian folks, but almost there isn't one India. There's many Indias, and so it's so culturally diverse. So, uh, yes, it's a simple question. How do I like it? But I feel like I want to give you a long answer. Like there's so
Please
much
do.
richness and diversity and history and color and vibrance and
So, what was it like? Like, what was your perception for India before, and then how did it change when you actually visited India?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess I thought, no, I know, but I had known people over the years who had been there, but, what did I really know about India before having gone there? I would have known about, well, actually, this may come as a surprise to you, but when I was a child, the doctor in our community, his last name was Patel, and he was from Gujarat. And so, like we would see the doctors, they were all very pleasant and very smart. But what else did I know about India? I knew about Mother Teresa and Calcutta, and the Indian food. I had I actually, when I moved to Toronto, there was a couple, an older couple, and the woman was German, and she had been a childhood friend of my mother-in-law, and she was married to an Indian man. He was from Punjab. He was a Punjabi Hindu, and they helped us kind of get things settled. But yeah, he would tell us stories about India. But and he had actually been an international student in Canada in the 1950s, if you could believe it. But he was traveling back every year, and he would tell us stories. So it seemed like an adventurous place. It seemed like a busy place. But I'm uh, always cautious about what my own perceptions are, because I know they're probably wrong. Especially if you're going into a new learning experience. And so I remember purposefully in my trying to clear my mind, and thinking, no, I just want to engage. I want to have an experience, and I tried to reject any thought of those thoughts ahead of time, and just come in with as a blank slate, as an empty canvas, and let India paint its picture on me. Um, but but most definitely, I think the first time I went there, I was in we spent a lot of time in Chandigarh in the north, because that's a very popular place for Indian students. And I think I got to Delhi and to Gujarat. I was in a couple of cities in Gujarat, and maybe Kerala. So just kind of on the west part. And then since then, I've been to a number of other parts of the country. But that was one thing that struck me too. Three are very different places, like the different I guess you say states, not provinces, like we have here in Canada. The different states all have a different culture and a
Different
different
culture, different from the habits, different language.
everything, and food is different.
Yes.
Even sometimes attitudes are different, how people will communicate with you. I won't I'm not going to start giving examples from different states, because maybe I won't be, but there, some places you would see people are very excitable, and they're very forward, and they're very interested. Other places they're more shy, it's a quieter people. So yeah, it's, as I said, it seems like there are many Indias.
The only thing which unite them is that they're Indians.
No, and that is true. Everybody is very proud Indians. I'll noticed that, and we see it with the students when the cricket matches are the international cricket matches are happening. It's yes, it's very clear who's who. But yeah, very proud Indians. Yeah. But and it's interesting to me because in Canada we talk about diversity a lot because so many people in Canada. Well, I mean, we have Indigenous Canadians, but everyone else is the descendant of a settler of one sort or another. And But it seems to me like there's an ancient diversity in India, like it, and it's a place that people could study to understand how. I remember the one day it was in no, I don't remember what city it was in the north, certainly. But I was standing on the street and there was a mosque on one side, and there was a Sikh temple and an Hindu temple and a Christian church, and all four were looking at each other. And I don't think there are that many. Like, it was like just a corner, and there was one of each, and each at 90 degrees. I don't think there are many places in the world where you would see that.
Absolutely.
It's and the fact that not one of those was a new building, right? They have been there for probably generations. Uh, that I think is you see so much conflict that's happening in the world over these religious tensions. Um, and but it's a
Secularism, we are very proud of it.
I think so. I think it's something that should be a source of pride. But beyond that too, for the rest of us, it's something we should pay attention to and see how is that being done. And I'm sure that there are frictions that rise up from time to time, but overall, and having, like, people talk about democracy as if it's a natural thing. And I don't really think it is. I think, like, if you look at the history of the world, democracy is not, it's a rather new idea. But this is another thing I think that India does very, very well is that you can have, what are we, 1.4 billion, we say here, uh, and that you can run an election without, like, and nobody knows the outcome of that election ahead of time. That it's run fairly or reasonably fairly, and that's incredible. They can't do that in the United States without a big fight. So even in Canada, I think we're pretty good in Canada here, but we've only got 40. I think we say crore in India, 40 crore people, or is that right? 4 crore people, 40 million people. Um, uh, but to have like hundreds of times the population and with such diversity and be able to maintain that is remarkable in my mind. So, anyways, that's a long answer to what I think of India.
Yeah. So coming back to the career readiness, what
Yeah,
advice would you give to a 20-year-old student who's preparing for an international career?
I would say really do your homework. Really understand where it is you're going. Uh, do your own research. Um, I always tell my international, this is not, I tell all international students because they become very close to their friends. And I say, somewhere right now in Canada, there is a young man who the police are putting the handcuffs on. And the story begins with, but my friends told me. So, um, yeah, so I think you really need to do your own research. Don't listen to even what, like, get your information from a lot of different sources, and really be careful who you trust, because there's a lot of people are making a lot of money off international education, and they want you to go and study abroad, and they're getting paid for so, but that that doesn't mean you don't have power. Every individual has a lot of power, and so it's really important. Understand the place you intend to go to, the institution you intend to go to. What is the accreditation? What does the job scope look like? If you intend to settle, understand job scope in that place. Like, if you're coming to Canada, know the different parts of Canada. if I'm going to a place that's 3,000 kilometers from the ocean, I probably shouldn't be studying marine biology. It's you need to understand the local market that you're going into, and go on to English websites so that you're seeing what are the local people saying. What is that? The other thing too is uh, when you do come if you come to study in Canada, uh, the public institutions um, are very reliable. They're very they tend to have programs that are recognized across the country. But that doesn't mean every program is going to be equal. Just because you come and study a program in Canada, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be a job handed to you on the back end. You have to be aware of local labor markets and things like now we have Chat GPT and we have Grok and AI of different sorts. You can have conversations on these topics and say, okay, if I come to study in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and so I don't live in Winnipeg, Manitoba, but there's a school. So I'll use some place that it doesn't employ me. There's a school in Manitoba called Red River College. It's a popular. So if a young student was to come to, I think I said Winnipeg, Manitoba, and then we're going to study at Red River College, uh, and if you're going to go and study in a place like that, you'd be well served to just go on Google and search the term Red River College. Find out what are the programs, what are students studying there, what is search Winnipeg, Manitoba. What is life like there? What are the different neighborhoods in the community? There might be parts of the city that are safe and some that are less so. So you need to know that. You need to have a conversation with Chat GPT. What is life like in Winnipeg, Manitoba for a typical international student? And it will give you an excellent idea. And know about the people that you're going to be coming in contact with. And so uh how advice I would give you is just prepare and inform yourself and educate yourself and talk to a lot of different people, um and really use your critical thinking skills, and don't create a romantic idea in your mind of what life is going to be like ahead of time, because it's probably not accurate, and you're going to be in for a surprise, and it might not be entirely pleasant. But the other thing I would say is this really what you want to do? Like, I've given you my fond impressions of India. India is a wonderful place. It's a good place to live. And I have been in homes of young students who wanted in the worst way to come to Canada, and I would be in their home, and I would see they were surrounded by a family that loved them so much, and beautiful homes, as nice as what I live in Canada. And there's a family business, and it's going very well, and they're generations of success. I'm not sure I'd want to leave that. I'm not sure that you would necessarily have a better life in Canada. And so, like, minus 40 degrees Celsius is a real thing. Canada is very different from the United States. It's very easy to get into the middle class in Canada. Uh, but getting past that is not. So if you want to be Steve Jobs, Canada is not necessarily the place to come. If you want to be Elon Musk, that's the United States. You can do it there. You can also crash and burn there much
No,
easier than
this
you
was
can in
just
Canada. So
like not necessarily Canada, but any the students, like for Indian students,
yeah,
they go abroad to
yeah,
study. Any country for that matter.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. You need to know where you're going, and 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 so if I like, that's a great comment you're making. I work with a gentleman who came from an African country, and he first studied in the Netherlands, and then he studied in Canada. Uh, and those are very different cultures. The two countries are incredibly different. I mean, they're both, they have some European heritage in them, that's the dominant culture, but incredibly different. Uh, and so you need to You need to go, you need to understand where you're going and make sure that that's the right choice for you. But don't be so sure that it's better somewhere else. We have a saying here that the grass is not always greener on the other side of the meadow. And so it might be, and I've met students too over the years, almost 25 years in this business, uh, that have said to me, they've gone back, and I've kept in touch with them. And they said, no, I was happier. I'm happier in my home country. I'm glad I went to Canada. I had a good experience, but no, I think I'm meant to be here, and that's not failure. That's fine. Not everybody needs to study abroad, and also India, our prime minister was just in India last week, making a deal. There's a bright future in India. I follow uh, a political commentator a lot online. His name is Peter Zion, and he talks about India being one of the big countries to watch out in the next 50 years. So a young person, that's your career. The next 50 years, and there's just geographic reasons why India is very, very well positioned for the future. And so you need to educate yourself, and you need to do that self-reflection and know, is this right for me, and is this something? But I can tell you, if you have a sense of adventure, as I did when I was young, and if you really want you're willing to be resilient, a hard worker, you're willing to, d- one of the mistakes that I think a lot
Unlearn
of
and
people,
relearn.
yeah, 100%. One of the mistakes that I know that people make a lot is, if you come to a foreign country and you stay in a hotel, and so let's say I myself, if I go to India and I stay in the Intercontinental Hotel, and I get the all-inclusive Western breakfast, and I only meet people who are speaking English, and I have a taxi or a driver taking me around, I'm not really having an Indian experience, you know and so
Absolutely.
uh you have to understand that, right? Like, you can't, you can create your own little world inside another country, but that's not really, I think, a pathway to success. I think you need to jump in with both feet. And so if you're coming to Canada, you need to get to a hockey game, you need to buy some ice skates, and you know uh understand what poutine is, and our the foods that we have, and these kind of experiences. And um our mutual friend, who introduced us, that is actually, he's been very successful here in Canada, and that's exactly why he's done it. In his first year living in Canada, he bought ice skates, and he learned how to ice skate. He bought a bicycle. He
Adaptability, I think that is the
That's
main
it. That's it. Yeah. Yeah. That's what you need to do.
crux.
But if you really, and it's okay to not want that, but then I think you should question your intentions. Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So, Ian, I truly believe education remains one of the strongest bridges between nations. And from your perspective, what responsibility do educators carry in shaping globally aware citizens?
Right. So I think I think that my answer to this is just very much my opinion. Um, so I think two things, though. I look at educator not as I really buy into this idea of the adult learner as being empowered, being personally empowered. So I look at the educator as the travel guide, as the tour guide. I look at, and I think education is moving to where the student is not beneath the teacher. The student, in fact, it might even be the other way. The student employs the teacher, and people are looking at education as a consumable product. And I think that's the way it has to be. I think that's the way it's moving. So our responsibility is changed now. So the student has more power, and I'm talking about adult learners. Like, I'm not. This wouldn't necessarily apply to young children learning in a primary school, but the I think it's a facilitator of experiences. And I think our responsibility is to lead adults into those experiences, giving them the control for both success and failure. And we're not parenting the students anymore. It's about saying to the students, you need to take responsibility, you need to take a personal agency, but you also need to grab your own success, and we're here to remove barriers to that success, and give you experiences that do allow you to have a transformation, a personal transformation, lead you into if you're having a cross-cultural experience, let's help you have that transformational learning experience. um but yeah, and I think going forward, that's the way it's going to be. I don't think educators, like, when I began as a university student back in the 90s, the professor was like two steps below God. Like, they knew everything there was to
There in
know.
Canada also?
Absolutely. Back then it was, yeah, yeah. But now we're calling them by their given names, and and young people too. We call them Generation Z. Uh, they're Generation Z. They're challenging adults, and they they're it's a different way, and so. But I think this is the way it has to be. I think education is going to be more personalized, going to be more customized. I even questioned about the idea of the full bachelor, master's, PhD kind of system. I don't know if that's gonna last forever. I
Absolutely.
wonder if it's gonna be
So
more.
that was also one of my questions, that is there any change in the curriculum with AI coming in and social media and digital media coming so rapidly?
Yeah, especially when it comes to assessment, right? Because um, if you're simply doing exams based on your recollection, then I don't think it really matters that much. You can have the students answer those pencil paper exams. But if you're assessing performance through, like, essay writing and these
Yeah,
handing in work of that sort, uh, I think it's the AI. We're gonna have to look at it differently. So this question has not been answered yet. It's ongoing, but I think what you're gonna start to see is more real time. So it'll be conversational based assessments. So if you're the educator and I'm the learner, we're going to have a conversation, and you're going to, in some way, or maybe it's a presentation, and I'm going to verbally tell you what I know, and you're going to challenge me on what I've learned. And I think that's the direction we're going to go. I think it's a mistake uh to fear it. I think we just have to embrace it. And I think just the way when we don't think of like a pencil and paper as replacing the human mind. I think
absolutely. As
this
a
is
threat.
just the next step in our evolution. And
Absolutely.
but schools are really trying to get their minds around assessment. How do we assess when people do have AI? And there's different ideas about that.
Thank you, Ian, for sharing such thoughtful and structured insights. I had a lovely time, a lovely conversation, and I'm
Uh,
sure my listeners would have really got some great insights.
It's been my pleasure, Neha, and I'm really glad that we were able to connect. And anytime, I hope I have done given something worthwhile to your listeners. And
Very sure. I'm
uh,
very sure about it.
welcome to come and visit me in Canada, whenever you
Great.
get.
Thank you. Great. Have a wonderful evening and
I
hope
I
our
look forward.
students got some benefit out of this conversation.
Thank you so much, Neha. You have a great day.
To everyone listening, global readiness is not about geography, it is about adaptability, awareness, and lifelong learning. This was episode 1 of Education Beyond Borders. In our next episode, we explore this conversation from a lived experience lens. Until then, stay curious, stay grounded, and keep evolving. Thank you.